Here's a lecture on Hume's design argument by analogy. You should pay attention to this lecture because you'll be responsible for the information on the test that's coming up. When it comes to design arguments in general, the main question is this: why does the universe and many of the things it contains appear to be designed? So you have things like the cell, the human body, DNA, you have the constants of physics, you have various aspects of our universe that appear to be designed. And the answer for why it appears to be designed, according to the argument at least, is this: there is a being wise and powerful enough to bring about the order and design in the universe, which is very much like what we call God, and some even try to go all the way to God based on the design argument. So it starts from a premise about the universe, that it or some feature in it appears designed. Some noteworthy proponents: St. Thomas Aquinas, William Paley, Alvin Plantinga, and Alvin Plantinga is still alive. Some noteworthy opponents: David Hume, he'll be the focus of this lecture, Bertrand Russell, and John Mackey. So here's David Hume. He lived from 1711 to 1776. He wrote a book called Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, which criticizes arguments for God's existence. And this book is a standard text in philosophy of religion. So in the book, you have various characters. So Philo, Cleanthes, Demea, and Philo is often taken to be the mouthpiece of Hume, and Philo is more or less an atheist. It's not clear at the end of the book whether he actually subscribes to atheism strictly speaking, but he does criticize the arguments for God's existence. And you have Cleanthes, who is what I'll call a rational believer. So he believes in God, and he thinks that you can, give good arguments for God's existence. And then you have Demea, who is a believer in God, but he's a mystic, and so we'll say. And what I mean by that is that he believes in God, but he doesn't think that we can give rational arguments in favor of God's existence. And so the way the book proceeds is that you have Cleanthes giving an argument, and then Philo and Demea sort of criticizing the argument. And then there's this back and forth between Cleanthes and the other two on the arguments themselves. And so what Hume attempts to do is to walk through each of the arguments for God's existence one by one and sort of dismantle them, and then look at, an argument against God's existence, and he tries to bolster that through Philo. So here is the relevant text from Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, where Cleanthes gives a design argument for God's existence. So I'll go ahead and read that. Look round the world. Contemplate the whole and every part of it. You will find it to be nothing but one great machine, subdivided into an infinite number of lesser machines, which again admit of subdivisions to a degree beyond what human senses and faculties can trace and explain. All these various machines, and even their most minute parts, are adjusted to each other with an accuracy which ravishes into admiration all men who have ever contemplated them. The curious adapting of means to ends throughout all nature resembles exactly, though it much exceeds, the productions of human contrivance, of human designs, thought, wisdom, and intelligence. Since, therefore, the effects resemble each other, we are led to infer by all the rules of analogy that the causes also resemble, and that the author of nature is somewhat similar to the mind of man, though possessed of a much larger faculties, proportioned to the grandeur of the work which he has executed. By this argument a posteriori, and by this argument alone, do we prove at once the existence of a deity and his similarity to human mind and intelligence. So, in this section of our course, we are talking about analogical argumentation, and I take this to be an argument by analogy, especially as evidenced by this phrase here, by all the rules of analogy. And you have some other indicators of that you have an argument here, like the word therefore, infer, argument, right? And so you can do an exercise here where you try to pick out the premises and the conclusion of the argument. So to help you, proceeding according to the structure of analogical arguments, we'll answer these questions. What two things or cases are being compared? What is Cleanthes comparing here? Because that's what you have in analogical arguments, a comparison that's being made. What characteristics do these cases have in common? Remember, with analogical arguments, we compare two things and identify characteristics that they have in common. And then what characteristic does one case have that is being inferred in the other case? So we know that the one has it, and we're inferring it for the other. That's exactly how analogical arguments work. So you list the cases or the things being compared, the characteristics they have in common, and then the characteristic that we'll infer that we know for one but not the other. So when you're trying to come up with the structure of analogical arguments, you're going to answer these questions, and you'll do it for the Hume argument. So here's what I found. What two things or cases are being compared? The productions of human contrivance are being compared to the universe and its parts. What is a production of human contrivance? Well, that's a human artifact or a human creation. We could say simply a machine. And what characteristics do these cases have in common? There are various options. Okay, complexity, order, and purpose. So machines are complex and they're ordered. They have many parts, which is what I mean by their complexity, but also the parts are in a specific order. And that has to do with complexity as well, parts and their relations. And purpose, like the parts are not only in a specific order, but they're in that order for a specific purpose. And you might say we have that with the universe, or at least parts of the universe, like the human body, like the constants of physics. They're finely tuned for life to exist, like the position of the Earth in the solar system, as well as in the place in the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. All these things permit life, right? And so, you compare a machine to the universe, or at least parts of the universe, and you find some similarities. And what characteristic does one case have that is being inferred in the other case? An intelligent cause. So what do we know of machines? They were created by an intelligence, namely human beings. And then we can infer by the rules of analogy that the universe was created by an intelligence. So you can piece the argument together by answering the questions as I did. So here's the argument, which I believe I got from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I should have had the reference there. The material universe resembles the intelligent productions of human beings in that it exhibits apparent design. The design in any human artifact is the effect of having been made by an intelligent being. Therefore, the design in the material universe is the effect of having been made by an intelligent being or creator. So how does a person respond to the design argument by analogy? Well, if you read Hume's dialogues concerning natural religion, you'll see that Philo does give a response. When you ask, how do you respond as you would to any analogical argument? You can ask, can you see any relevant disanalogies between machines and the universe? Are there things that are different between machines and the universe that would really sort of undermine the inference where you can say that machines were created by an intelligence, whereas we can't say that same thing of the universe, or at least maybe we don't know? Can you think of any counter analogies? This is a little trickier. If you've read the chapter, you'd know what a counter-analogy is, and Philo actually proposes a couple. He imagines that the universe is like a vegetable instead of a machine, and so when it comes to counter-analogies, the analogy that you propose as a counter-analogy has to be stronger than the original analogy, and it has to conclude something that is inconsistent with the argument that uses the original analogy. And if the analogy you're proposing is a stronger one than the original analogy, then you've successfully undermined that analogical argument. So that's really tricky, proposing a counter-analogy. And what consequences of Hume's argument do you see that design proponents may not be willing to accept? So, Philo, he says, well, maybe the universe was created by a committee rather than a single deity. So the believer in God, singular, may not like that sort of ambiguity there, that maybe you can't get to a single designer, but rather it's open to there being multiple designers based on this argument. So that might be a consequence of Hume's argument, or Cleanthes's argument, that the design proponent may not be willing to accept. Philo also, gets a bit funny, and he talks about how maybe the universe was created by an infant deity, and that's why, hey, the infant deity gave it its best shot, but that's why we have pain and suffering, because the infant was just, inexperienced in creating universes. Or maybe it was an old deity who gave his last best effort and then keeled over. So yeah, these are various proposals that Philo gives it, and they're tongue-in-cheek. However, he's still trying to make a serious point that maybe the design argument can only get you so far. Okay, so that's the design argument for, well, at least the analogical argument that's found in Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture.